full honesty, picking up a mic after a couple months now feels very strange, feels very new. This feels like something I'm learning all over again, but I'm going to take that as a good thing. And it is a good thing, which ties heavily into what we'll be talking about today. But before I get into all of that, Happy New Year. Welcome to Trying Times. I'm throwing all of the things out all at once. But Happy New Year! It's 2025, and I hope you had a really, really wonderful holiday season, however you may have spent that, however you may be celebrating or were celebrating. I hope it was a really good time. I know the holidays can be a very big whirlwind of feelings and all the things, sometimes chaos, if you will, for everybody. So hopefully it was good. Hopefully it was rejuvenating to some point. Hopefully you got to rest. I'm really appreciative of you being here, whether this is your first time listening to this or whether you've listened before. My name's Carmen. I want to introduce myself because I'm the host of this show, and I'm really glad to be talking with you today. I also just wanted to say something I always do when I start the show is say, welcome, we're now friends. Very forceful. It's like you don't have a choice. We're now friends, by the way. That's just how it's going to be. Unless you click off, we're not, but that's okay. I appreciated the 3 seconds I had you here for. But yes, this was a very chaotic opening to the show and to the start of this show for this year. I took quite a good break from this at the end of last year. I didn't record for like a month and a half, almost 2 months. I pre recorded my episode for the very last one I was going to post for the year. Did that even make sense? I don't know. But I pre recorded that and then I scheduled it and it went up and I was very happy with it. I did talk a lot in that about how I was taking some time off for the holidays, which I think if you're able to do that, it's something we should all do. I think that should be a thing we get to do regularly, to be quite honest. I don't know. If you feel like you need time off, if you're going through something, then yeah, you deserve time off. It shouldn't just be something around the holidays, but I feel like it's kind of this time where we all get maybe a little bit of an excuse to be like, I'm just going to take some time off. And it's kind of just okayed for the most part. So I hope you had a good time. And hopefully it was good for you to have some of that time off if you got to have any time off. So that was really nice. I felt like I got to rest a little bit, spent time with family, spent time with friends, caught up with a bunch of loved ones. It felt really good. It's very cold now. I'm just making very baseline conversation here. It is freezing out here, to be honest. It is very cold all of a sudden. January, I forget, is really cold. It's also like following the aftermath of Christmas and then New Year's. And usually when Christmas passes, it's kind of like, okay, you have a few days and then you have New Year's. So it's like there's something back to back in a sense, and there's always something going on. Whereas after New Year's, I just feel like there's nothing. And it's kind of just like gloomy. Everybody's in limbo. Like, what's going on? Unless you have like a birthday, maybe, I don't know. Not that you need an event to celebrate or something, but you know what I mean. Like, it goes from all of this stuff to just kind of silence. To a point, it's like white noise, you know? Everything just gets very quiet and it just feels kind of like a void. This sounds so depressing. Welcome to Trying Times. This is a void. But yeah, it just feels a little bit weird. So I always forget because I think I'm so locked into what is going on for the holidays that I manage to forget every single year without fail. That January is just very cold. It's quite dark, to be fair, because the sun sets so early. So the days feel very short. And yeah, it's just, yeah, I don't know. It's just not maybe my most favorite time of year, but also we're here. We got to take it for what it is. So that's why I say I hope you got some time off. I hope you got to enjoy. I hope you got to relax. And I'm really happy to have you here and listening. And I just want to throw out that if you do not follow the Trying Times Instagram, you should go and check that out because there's a new participation slash episode submission form that you can actually participate in now to share your thoughts on certain prompts and topics that I have listed on there. And you can do so by either typing in your answers, and I'll be sharing those on a future episode, most likely, or you can send me a voice recording and I'll actually play that in an episode in the future because I would just love to get some more participation from you in this and get to be able to hear your thoughts on the things I'm talking about. This year, I did talk about last year how I wanted to change up the format of some of these episodes. So this will be the very first of a sort of new format of episodes that we're going to be doing. And in this, I'm basically just going to include a sort of fact, talk about something from personal experience. And then at the very end, I like to do some sort of audience participation or submission, if you will, for an episode. Or I would love to go and look through an online thread of like Reddit or wherever else and see what people are saying about the things that I'm talking about. So, yeah, that was a mouthful. I've been talking at you for like 7 minutes now, and I appreciate you being here again for the millionth time. We will now be getting into the topic that we're starting this year off with. And this is a topic that is not shy from the show, and I'm not shy of talking about it. It's something that I actually based this whole show on, and that is imposter syndrome. Yay! I feel like January in itself could kind of be imposter syndrome, I guess, just personified to a certain degree, because there's a lot of resolutions that everybody sets. Me personally, I don't believe in resolutions at this point. I think when I was maybe in high school, I was like, ooh, I want to set resolutions, and then realized very quickly I'm setting a lot of pressure on myself. And this actually isn't great. This isn't a fun time. I feel pretty shitty. So I just don't do that anymore. Instead, I like to focus on small goals throughout the year and just kind of work on that. But imposter syndrome is something I really wanted to revisit and talk about in this format and in this sense, because I just feel like it's really good to talk about. And I feel like the more we talk about something like this, the more we realize we're not alone in certain feelings, because imposter syndrome is in fact something that will make you feel incredibly alone. So with that, I will start this episode or this topic segment with a fact that, according to the University of Cincinnati, experts estimate that at least 80% of the general population experience imposter syndrome at some point in their lives. All this to say, you're not alone, but also if you feel like you don't know what you're doing, there's a good chance if you look around the room that you're in, or you look through a list of names maybe that you're lumped into, you're probably not alone in that feeling. And everybody deals with this in very, very different ways. That's the case too, where sometimes somebody could be like just really dealing with excruciating imposter syndrome, and you would never be able to tell from looking at them or even sometimes talking to them, because everybody processes things differently. Everybody compartmentalizes things differently, or they don't at all. And this is something that either people are really great at concealing, and if you are, that's amazing. And if you're not at great at concealing that, then that's okay too. But it is something that a lot of people deal with and a lot of people struggle with. I want to specifically say that because it's affected me at several different points of my life, especially whenever I'm at the chapter of starting something new. It stresses me out. It happens often. And it's just part, I think, of the human experience at this point. Like, you can't really do anything without that. And I got to ask somebody that I look up to about this, and more so, I guess, about being in your comfort zone and how that feels when you're starting new projects. And their insight to this was that it's a scary thing anytime you start anything new, but without that feeling, it wouldn't really remind you that you care or that you're very invested or that you maybe don't want to put your best foot forward. It's honestly in some a reminder of a lot of different things. And I think I give this a pretty bad rap a lot of the time because it's like, I don't want to feel this. It's making me feel crappy. It's making me feel down. It's making me feel so bad and inadequate. And yeah, that's definitely, I would say, like 75% of the feeling. But I do tend to forget that 25% of that feeling can also be the fact that it's just showing how much you care and how much you want to try and how much you want to put your best foot forward and how much you don't want to fail. Because that's another thing. We as humans, I mean, a lot of us at least, we really don't like failure. It's terrifying. I would even argue that even in my own life, I've potentially avoided things out of the fear of failure, and that's something that we all do because who wants to fail? Why would you want to fail? It's not a fun feeling. And in hindsight, those are usually the moments where you learn the most. Not that you can't learn from succeeding. Surely that feels like a reward. It's exciting. You did something, you tried something, it happened, and you feel great. You're like, okay, cool, I did that. But there's a lot that you can learn from failing too. And I think that that goes hand in hand with imposter syndrome sometimes, because sometimes when you go into something even more nervous than you anticipate being, sometimes that means you get to learn more. You're a little bit more cognizant, you're a little bit more hyper aware. Sometimes it takes away from your experience, sometimes it can add to it. It's different for everybody. But the fact that 80% of the general population experiences this at some point in their lives is really both humbling and also, I guess, just very community based in a sense. Like, it just reminds me that if I'm ever feeling this, I'm not the only one. And even if it's not somebody dealing with that in the exact same sense that I might be dealing with it in, I mean, it's still possible that somebody's feeling it in their own way. So that's something I wanted to share about imposter syndrome. I will proceed now to share about this from my own personal experience. And like I said, I've experienced this a handful of times, like in all facets of life, truly, in my own space with myself, imposter syndrome with relationships of all sorts, imposter syndrome with career, imposter syndrome with schooling, imposter syndrome with literally anything you name it, imposter syndrome. It can kick into full gear at the most random times. And oftentimes, I like to think of this as a sign of care and the fact that you just really want to try and you don't want to fail or you don't want to trip up because nobody wants to experience that. Of course, like I just said, it doesn't feel like the greatest thing to have. But in hindsight, those are usually the moments where you're actually learning the most, you're doing a lot, and it's probably really good for you. So I will say that one of the most memorable moments to me, at least right now, was when I started the show. I can honestly say I have worked around so many wonderful people in my life who have such a vast knowledge on equipment, on, building a really, really strong team of professionals and doing everything from A to Z that might come with either starting a show, a series, whatever you want to call it. I've been around so many wonderful people that are so good at that and they're so well versed in that sub genre of work and of space and of organization. And me as a person, I'm very organized. I've worked in that capacity a number of times now to know what that workflow is like and to understand that a little bit better. So it's exciting to be able to do something like this for myself and to be able to work at it at my own pace, to have it be focused on whatever I want it to be focused on. And it's very enriching and exciting. And at the same time, it's terrifying because I've been in spaces where everybody's been equipped and I'm stepping into this potentially with a lack of knowledge because I don't know everything and everything that I'm supposed to know. Because that's something also I think that fuels imposter syndrome when you start anything is that you feel like you need to know everything and anything at all times because it helps you feel prepared. And the truth of the matter is, you honestly learn the most by doing. So, in this scenario, I could walk into this with not so much knowledge, and I could only really benefit from learning by trying. But that was one thing that my imposter syndrome was telling me was, oh my God, you have a lack of knowledge. Okay, next, you have a lack of equipment. I will throw this back to like the first, I don't even know, 5, 10 episodes I recorded of the show. I did not have a proper mic. I did not know how to use a proper mic on my own. And I was just terrified of doing it. So I was just trying to get into the swing of recording with like my little headphone microphone, which I hated. And you know what? It got the job done. It got the job done. It got me feeling well equipped working with software, working with my own notes, working with figuring out my format of how I best like to record. And that was something that I learned from. Again, I could only learn by doing. Granted, do I know the most about equipment right now? No. But am I looking forward to learning about that in the future as I continue to try at this? Yeah, of course, because that's exciting and that's the only way you learn. The last thing I mentioned was working with a team of professionals who know how to do everything from A to Z. Now, of course, this cannot be all encompassed in just my hands because I think working with a team is one of the best ways to achieve like a goal or a vision or whatever you want to call that or a project. And working on your own sometimes can feel pretty limiting, but it does also open the doors to expanding your horizons and pushing yourself out of your comfort zone to learn more than you ever planned to learn. And while that can at times feel isolating, it can also feel really exciting. It can feel very rewarding and it can feel really good because you're just doing something different than you would normally do. So, In sum, imposter syndrome will try to kick your ass. I'm speaking to myself and to you here. It will try to kick your ass, but you just kind of have to push because what I did here was I really evaluated each of these things and I sat down and I was like, okay, yeah, there's this. I guess I have this fear. I guess I have this fear. Maybe, yeah, this doesn't feel the greatest either. But at the same time, I was kind of like, is this prohibiting me from actually doing what I want to do? No. Is the fact that I have a lack of knowledge really going to stop me from being able to do this? No, because I can learn. Is a lack of equipment going to stop me from doing this? No, because I can still try with what I have and then build on the tools that I need when I am growing. And is a team of professionals maybe lacking in presence going to stop me from being able to try this? No, it really isn't. So I just kind of had to push and focus on the fact that I have an idea that I really, really would love to expand on and learn on. And just went off of that solely, to be honest. I just really went off of that to understand what to do, how to do it. And even still, I don't think I've even really scratched the surface with everything there is to know and to learn and to do. But that's kind of great to me because that means there's only space to grow. And I love that idea of having space to grow. It's very uncomfortable, it's very daunting, and imposter syndrome will kick in time and time again. But it is really something special because, again, it's just opening the doors up for more. And there's always something more that you could really benefit from. So I really love that. And that really just kind of keeps my curiosity going, I guess, and it encourages me to keep pushing. So that's how I feel about about imposter syndrome. Now, can I say that this worked out this way in every single situation I've been in life? Absolutely not. I've been in situations in life where imposter syndrome has totally kicked my butt, and maybe I've not been able to focus. Maybe I've not been able to put my best foot forward, but that's just out of fear. And I think that that's another side of it. There's also the fear side. There's the side of, again, fear of failure or a fear of rejection. And that's just something that we all experience at some time or another. It happens. I will say there was a moment in university when I was really heavily interested in journalism. And I think I've vaguely talked about this before, but the program I was in really was like an umbrella to learn about pop culture, to learn about journalism, to learn about public relations, to learn about also film and all these kinds of things. And into my second year, I was really interested. I believe my second or third year, I was really interested in journalism. And this is something I really wanted to try, but I was really, really nervous about putting myself out there and especially putting my voice out there and sharing that with people. The irony of that now is hilarious. That has not fallen on me. Believe me, I think that's so funny now because it's like I do this. And this is still scary sometimes, sure, but it wasn't the same for me back then. So I was really, really interested in the scope of journalism. I took a journalism class and no shade to my professor. She was lovely. I was doing so poorly in that class. I was receiving probably some of the lowest grades I'd gotten. And meanwhile, I was literally doing great in other classes. So I was just like, "Oh my God, I'm just really shitty at this." And it hurt because I was like, this is something I really want to try. And it got to a point where my professor, again, we listen and we don't judge, told me that it was probably something I could never do. And that oddly fueled me to just really want to do it even more. So I think I later that year, maybe it was later that year or the year following that year, I actually went ahead and went to my school or my university's paper, like our newspaper, and I put myself out there and I ended up doing a arts and culture cover section story, if you will, on a local concert that was happening in the city where I went to school. And that was just like so rewarding and exciting because it was also kind of like the imposter syndrome was there heavy, believe me, but it was also very much like, oh my God, I didn't let it get to the point where somebody said you can't do this. And then I actually just stopped. Like I did do the thing and I tried. And don't get me wrong, I was shaking while I was doing it, but I did it. So I think in those sort of instances, the best way that you can learn is by doing and just trying and pushing, even if it's just uncomfortable. Obviously, stay within your means, right? Don't make yourself so uncomfortable that you're like barely functioning, because that's a different type of fear. And I think that should be paid very much attention to, and you shouldn't push that too far beyond its means. But with this, I felt, oh my God, okay, yeah, this is uncomfortable. So I gave myself some time and space, and then I approached it when I felt ready. And I'll be honest, I still didn't really feel ready. I was like 40% ready and 60% scared. And I was like, okay, we're just going to try. And if it doesn't work, then oh well, I tried. And I did it. So again, that lack of knowledge, maybe that lack of what felt like support that could have been there wasn't there. And granted, just because I didn't have support from one person didn't mean I didn't have support from like a wonderful group of people, because that's not the case. I felt very supported and I was very happy, but I kind of had an idea and I just went off of that. And I think that's really the best way to go about these things sometimes. So that's my experience with imposter syndrome. Now I want to get a little bit into other people's experiences of imposter syndrome. I went to Reddit and I wanted to look through some threads to see what people were talking about. And obviously, in the Ask Reddit, what is it called? The sub community or whatever, the Ask Reddit community. I'm like, what is that thing called? In that community, there are a ton of posts about everything. So somebody shared a thread, or they started a thread. Somebody started a thread and they basically wrote, imposter syndrome is a persistent feeling that causes someone to constantly doubt themselves and their abilities despite evidence and fear that they may be exposed as a fraud. Reddit, how do you feel this way about work or school? How do you overcome it, if at all? And then they put serious at the end in brackets, because I think a lot of people do just kind of say, hey, get over it. It is what it is. I wanted to share some of my favorite answers to this because I thought that there were some really good ones. The very first one is from somebody saying that when they self-published their first book in Czech, I'm guessing like Czech Republic, yeah, in Czech, at the age of 40, I thought to myself, who am I kidding? 3 years, 7 books, and 30,000 sold copies later, I sort of accepted that now I am a writer. Somebody commented underneath this and they're like, it's funny how even once we find some success, people who suffer from this are still kind of like, yeah, I guess I do this professionally, sort of. And it's true. I got to a point in that with a ton of things that I've tried, and I'm just like, oh yeah, I just do this. Or I forget that I do things. That's another thing. I just forget. I will literally have to write things down. I just forget that I do stuff. Somebody else responded and said, I can tell you I've been working in the industry I've been working in for over 20 years now. I know I have an excellent reputation professionally, and I'm considered one of the best at what I do. However, every day I am worried that they are going to figure out that I don't know shit and I will be exposed for the fraud that I am. Not sure I'll ever lose that feeling. And that's 20 years into something. Like, that says so much right there. And I feel like it's it's just something that's so human and it's so normal that we all experience. And somebody responded to that and they said, these people keep promoting me and paying me more. It's all a trap to ensnare me in my web of lies. I thought climbing the ladder would validate me to the point I could just accept that I'm good at it, but it's only made it worse. And honestly, that's very real. I feel like no matter how much validation you receive externally or, from anybody that is not yourself, will always feel kind of like, oh my God, wait, do they mean this? Wait, actually, is that true? And even sometimes when you validate yourself, it's going to still feel that way. But that is literally how this goes. And that's why it's so annoying. But the last one I want to share, the last answer, was from somebody who shares about their experience. And then they also reference an anecdote that I want to share at the very end of this to close out this episode. And I love this one. So they said, I struggled with imposter syndrome for ages. Every time I moved up a rung on my career progression, I would smash into it headlong and get into a serious funk. Oddly enough, what helped me more than anything was reading Neil Gaiman's anecdote about his own struggle and epiphany about it. That helped me put my challenges into perspective and get out of the perpetual spiral of self doubt. To which somebody responded and said, thanks for sharing that anecdote. I'm really struggling with imposter syndrome after a recent promotion, and that helps a lot. So, I will share the anecdote with you here. Also, I believe this person's name is Neil Gaiman. I might be mispronouncing that. I'm not sure. But yeah, okay. I'm just going to read through this. It's basically like a footnote to this person's story. So somebody asked and they said, hi, I read that you dealt with imposter syndrome in the past, and I'm really struggling with that right now. I'm in a good place and my friends are going through a lot, and I'm struggling to justify my success to myself when such amazing people are unhappy. I was wondering if you have any tips to feel less like this and maybe be kinder to myself, but without hurting anyone around me. It's a big ask, I know, but any help would make my life a lot less stressful. And they responded, Neil, with saying the best help I can offer is to point you to Amy Cuddy's book, Presence, which I've not yet checked that out. Maybe I should. She talks about imposter syndrome and interviews me in it and offers helpful insight. The second best help might be in the form of an anecdote. So here we go. Some years ago, I was luckily enough invited to a gathering of great and good people, artists, scientists, writers, and discoverers of things. And I felt that at any moment I would realize that I didn't qualify to be there among these people who had really done things. On my second or third night there, I was standing at the back of the hall while a musical entertainment happened. And I was talking to a very nice, polite, elderly gentleman about several things, including our shared first name. And then he pointed at the hall of people and said words to the effect of, I just look at all these people and I think, what the heck am I doing here? They've made amazing things. I just went where I was sent. And I said, yes, but you were the first man on the moon. I think that counts for something. Which, by the way, holy shit. And I felt a bit better because if Neil Armstrong felt like an imposter, maybe everybody did. Maybe there weren't any grown-ups, only people who had worked hard and also got lucky and were slightly out of their depth. All of us doing the best job we could, which is really all we can hope for. I thought that that was wonderful. And also, how telling is that right there of imposter syndrome? Because if you've experienced this ever, if you've felt this ever, you know this thing feels like an impending spiral of doom sometimes, especially when you're starting something new. Or in this scenario, especially when you're in a space with very like minded or creative people. And it can feel very invalidating at times for sure. But I think that that anecdote was one worth sharing. And dude, Neil Armstrong, like, that's nuts. Could you imagine being like, yeah, I just went where I was sent? You went to the moon. What? That's crazy. So if that doesn't help lessen your imposter syndrome in the slightest, I mean, I hope it does. But if it doesn't, maybe reading a little bit more into that would be insightful. I know there's tons of episodes of many different podcasts and videos by some wonderful therapists and social workers all over YouTube on this subject and how to cope with it. So I would definitely suggest checking some of those out if you're interested in learning a little bit more about this or researching it a little bit more. You could really go down a rabbit hole with this topic. I know I have so many times. This is like the seventh time I've talked about this. So it's no surprise to any of us, really. But I just want to share all of that. And I feel like this is a really good way to start the new year because even if you have some resolutions and you have some goals that you really, really want to achieve, just know it can happen over due time. Try to give yourself some grace, understand that things will take time, and it can happen. So, yeah, that's all. That's my very first episode of this show for 2025. And I just want to say thank you so much again for being here. I really appreciate you and your time. Please, if you want to talk about this at all or any other topics, feel free to message me at the Trying Times podcast on Instagram. I would love to hear from you. And again, if you'd love to be featured in an upcoming episode of Trying Times, please feel free to check out our Instagram, click on the link in our bio, and you can find the submission form in there to participate in one of our episodes. So yeah, that's everything for today. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll chat again soon, okay? Bye.